Hello, fifth grade. Today we're just reviewing something that you've already gone over. So hopefully this is going to be a super easy lesson for you. We're going to talk about conflict first. So put this on pause and grab your skills journal and open it up to the page with conflict. Remember, that will be under the section of literary elements or story elements. The first conflict that we're going to talk about is character versus character. This occurs when there are two characters that are in a problem with each other. In Bridge to Terabithia, here when Maybelle wants to go to Terabithia, and then Jess Aaron says, "You listen here, Maybelle Aarons," he whispered fiercely. "If I catch you following me one again, your life ain't worth nothing." Okay. The conflict there is Maybelle versus Jess, character versus character. So this is question number 1. I gave you one example. Now it's your turn. Give me another example of character versus character in the book you've been reading. The next conflict we're going to review is character versus nature. Character versus nature covers anything in the natural world, like tornadoes and fire and being out in the woods, or being stranded on an island, or struggling to survive in an ocean. Anything where the conflict is a result of the character versus something in nature. Disease and death are also considered something in nature. When Jess and Leslie get to Terabithia after it's been raining for several days, they stopped. The bed of the creek was roaring, 8-foot wide sea sweeping before it. Great branches of trees, logs, and trash swirling with them about like so many Egyptian chariots. The hungry waters licking and sometimes leaping the banks, stirring them to try to confine it. Wow. Leslie's voice was respectful. Yeah. Jess looked up at the rope. It was still twisted around the branch of the crabapple tree. His stomach felt cold. Maybe we ought to forget it today. The fact that the rain created these really scary waters is a great example of character versus nature. Okay, I gave you an example, and now it's your turn to find another example. So, number 2, find another example of character versus nature. Okay, so the third conflict we're going to talk about is character versus society. That's when a character goes up against a big group, like the community or the law. Remember when we were reading about segregation and integration, and we read about little Ruby Bridges just trying to go to school, and that whole community was bullying her as she just walked into her school. That would be an example of one little character against society. And thank goodness she won. So number 3, can you find an example of character versus society in your book? If not, can you find another example from another book that you've read sometime? And finally, sometimes we get in an argument with our own self. We want something really bad, but we know we shouldn't. We know it would be wrong. You might remember this moment in Tangled when Rapunzel was in an internal conflict.
I can't believe I did this! I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did this! Mother would be so furious. But that's okay. I mean, what she doesn't know won't kill her, right? Oh my gosh. This would kill her. This is so fun! I am a horrible daughter. I'm going back. I am never going back! I am a despicable human being. Best day ever!
Rapunzel definitely had some conflicting emotion. That's called internal conflict. At the end of this chapter, The Evil Spell, we find that Jess is feeling really guilty or shameful that he has this fear of the water. He even says it wasn't so much that he minded telling Leslie he was afraid to go. It was that he minded being afraid. It was as though he had been made with a great piece missing, one of Maybelle's puzzles, with this huge gap where somebody's eye and cheek and jaw should have been. Lord, it would have been better for him to be born without an arm than to go through life with no guts. So, Jess felt afraid, but he also felt shameful and embarrassed that he was afraid. He was in the middle of an internal conflict. Now it's your turn. Number 4. Now you give another example of internal conflict. Our other concept that we're going to talk about today is setting. Remember, setting is when and where, or time and place that the story took place. It always affects the decisions that the characters make and the plot. For example, what if Leslie and Jess had gone to High Point Academy? Then they would have been in this shirt instead of Leslie wearing the overalls. That would have affected the way the people treated her on her first day. Remember, everybody was making fun of her, sizing her up, thinking that she was poor or something because of the clothes that she was wearing. So, in that case, the school they went to, Lark Creek Elementary, affected the plot. Or what if they all lived in the big city instead of out in the country? They probably wouldn't have been able to build Terabithia out in the forest, and then they wouldn't have been so isolated. Then when the rain came, it probably wouldn't have mattered because they would have been indoors, like in their room or something. The time and history that a story takes place is also part of the setting. It always affects the decisions that the characters are making. For example, nowadays, Jess and Leslie probably wouldn't have had been to wait to see each other, even at nighttime if they had something to say. They'd probably pick up a phone and text. So for my last question, I've moved into this teeny tiny little house as a reminder that setting is time and place. Number 5, in addition to the examples I gave you, how did the setting affect the story that you're reading? And that's all we've got for today. See you next time.